Hello and welcome to Psych Space, the space to talk about all things psychology related. I'm Declan and today I want to talk to you about one of my biggest regrets from both my undergraduate and from my master's degree, which is not publishing any of my own research. Now, publishing your own research as a master's and certainly as an undergraduate student is by no means the norm. However, I have known people who have managed to pull it off. It can be a great experience regardless of whether you want to become a researcher or if, like me, you're more interested in clinical psychology, where equal emphasis is placed on research and practice within training. It can look great on a doctorate application or a job application. So with that in mind, here are my top 3 pieces of advice for getting your own research published as a student. Publishing your own research is a long and difficult journey, with many professional researchers spending several years focused on a single research paper. Completing the research project is difficult enough, but once complete, you'll need to find a specific scientific journal who are willing to publish your research paper. Your research paper needs to be in the correct format for the specific scientific journal you're hoping to publish with. Once your paper's been sent off, it will be subject to what's known as a peer review process, where experts in your field of research will go through, read the research, and get back to you with their response. Often, papers will just be outright rejected. In some cases, they will come back with small or significant changes needing to be made in order to be at that standard where it can be published. Or in very rare cases, maybe less than 1%, your paper could be accepted and published within a journal. So as you can see, it's a difficult process. So if you choose to take any of my advice from this video and go on to publish your own research, don't say I didn't warn you. So without further ado, here is my first piece of advice on how to publish your own research as a student. My first piece of advice is to find the right supervisor. When it comes to your undergraduate degree final year research project or your large research project as part of your master's degree, I know that in my experience, ahead of selecting what project you were doing, there was a list of research questions, potential topics of research, and attached to that was the supervisor who would be facilitating the project. Now, it can be really helpful to reach out to the supervisor in person or by email to find out more about the research project, to see whether it's something you're interested in, but also to ask them whether they're willing to help you to take that research a step further and try to get it published. Some supervisors might say, no, I'm afraid I don't have the time or the capacity to do that, or the project wouldn't really be suitable for publication. Other supervisors might be really keen and enthusiastic and even have aspirations of publishing it themselves. That's a requirement as part of the project. And others may be more negotiable. You might need to speak to them and clarify what you plan to do for the project and work out the details to see if it's suitable. Publishing as part of your research project within university can be great because you've got support from a supervisor who is very likely to be a published researcher themselves, so they can offer lots of support and guidance. Now, you might be wondering, when it comes to the publication itself, who's the lead researcher and how are you going to be recognised for your contributions? And what should happen, given that you should be doing the bulk of the work, is that you're considered to be the lead researcher, and so you're named as the first researcher or the lead researcher on the publication, with your supervisor's name also being there to recognise what will be a significant contribution that they should be making. My second piece of advice on how to get an opportunity to publish your own research as a student would be to consider completing a placement year as part of your psychology degree. Now, this could be a very specific research placement focused in on a very specific area of psychology that you're interested in, or it could be a more general placement where there happens to be an opportunity to complete some research. If you're going to complete a placement year, it's really important that when you apply to placements or when you're interviewing for placements to set out what your expectations are for that placement and ask them what they're expecting from you. It might be that in certain placements, they're looking for somebody who is willing to take on a leading role in completing a piece of research, and that you're going to get that adequate recognition and get that opportunity to be named as a lead researcher or at least an assisting researcher on a piece of research. However, there might also be placements out there where your contribution to the research isn't significant enough to warrant you being a named researcher. So it's important to make that clear so that you get the experience that you're looking for and you get the recognition you deserve. Not everybody wants to complete a placement year as part of their psychology degree, which is completely fine. It's a personal decision. And not everybody wants to complete a research placement. I mean, I know that I didn't. I wanted to get a placement where I got some more experience in a therapeutic environment. But it's important to consider that that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't be completing research. There may be places where you have the opportunity to get that practical clinical experience as well as research experience. I knew somebody who worked in a forensic setting where they were getting some quite practical clinical experience, but throughout the entire year of their placement, they were also able to publish 2 research papers as the lead author. So it just goes to show that although they're hard to come by, there are some brilliant placements out there that give you the opportunity to get some really valuable experiences. My third and final piece of advice for this video on how to get research published as a student would be to consider looking out for summer research internship programs. Now, I'm not sure if it's the same across universities in different cities, but certainly in my experience, there was a regular summer research internship program where you could either apply to join an existing research project, or you could even create your own application in which you outline a research proposal in order to try and get funding to complete your own research under supervision of an existing professional researcher. These internships are great opportunities, particularly because unlike university research projects, the expectation is that you're going to go on to publish. So, you don't need to chase a supervisor to say, oh, please let me publish, because they're hoping you're publishing going into the process. If you're worried that working over the summer could take away from an opportunity to work and save up some money for term time, you might not need to worry, because in some cases you can actually be paid per hour of time you spent contributing to research, so it's an opportunity for paid work experience. It's important to consider that although ideally you're going to end up with a published piece of research, getting onto a research internship is no guarantee that you're going to wind up being a published research, because it's such a difficult and competitive process. It's also important to remember that, as we stated, it's a long journey to publication, and a single summer might not be enough time for you to complete that research. So it's important to be mindful that it might carry over into term time, so you might need to manage your time effectively to be able to work on this project as well as your university work. Now, you might be wondering, given that I'm creating a video offering advice on how to publish research as a student, why didn't I do it myself? So it only seems fair that I go through each of my own pieces of advice and explain why I was unable to follow it myself. So going back to my undergraduate degree, when it came to my final year research project, I hadn't even considered the possibility of publishing going into the process. I think it was only later, listening to other students talk about their experiences with research and talking about their attempts to get research published, that I even realised it was a possibility. So it would have been something that could have been great to explore. However, if I'm being honest with myself, I'm not sure if at that stage in my psychology journey I could have produced a piece of research that was at high enough standard to publish. By the time I completed my master's degree, I think my research skills, I certainly focused a lot more on research skills and statistics, to the point where I improved my research project going from a 2-1 to a first. So it's possible that I could have produced a piece of research which was at a high enough standard to publish. However, the project which I was interested in was a service evaluation, focused in on a specific service, so I think the applications were quite limited to that particular service, so I don't think it's the sort of project which would have been suitable for publication. As for completing a placement year as part of a psychology degree, I did that. However, it was a placement which placed more emphasis on that clinical practice as opposed to research. There were elements of research. There was sort of service evaluation pieces to do. There were some audits and some literature reviews to help with specific interventions or particular areas of interest for the psychologists and the clinicians I was working with, but it wasn't really the sort of service where they were actively publishing research, so there wasn't really an opportunity there. I did apply for summer research internships. However, I waited until effectively the last opportunity I had to apply, which happened to coincide with COVID. So I can partially blame that for my application having been unsuccessful, because there were far fewer places, far fewer research projects running, and much less funding available. I've got to take some of the blame because clearly my application must have let me down. However, if I could go back in time, I would probably start applying much earlier in my psychology degree, so I had the opportunity to go away and to modify my research proposal in order to increase my chances of being successfully accepted onto the programme. I did try and make a link between my placement and the research proposal, and I don't know if that maybe overcomplicated things, and whether, like I said, it was not the sort of service which was maybe the most suitable for a piece of research which could be published, so that could have let me down. It should go without saying that in order to even start to consider publishing your own research at such an early stage in your psychology career, you need to be a really strong candidate and a really strong student, getting those fundamental research skills, statistics, report writing, to even stand a chance of being accepted onto something that grants you the opportunity to publish your own research. I know this particular video is focused specifically on publishing research, but it's important not to be disheartened if you go through your undergraduate and maybe a master's degree without publication, like myself, because there are other valuable ways of obtaining research experience. Your research projects that you complete during your degree are valuable regardless of whether or not they get published. You can complete service evaluations, you can complete placement years, you can do literature reviews, all without having to specifically publish something, and it can really help you in your research skills and your wider skills as a psychologist. Thanks for listening to the video. I really hope the advice can be helpful for someone out there. If anyone else has got any suggestions as to how you can obtain an opportunity to publish research as a student, please feel free to make a comment below. Or if anybody wants to share their experience of an undergraduate or a master's degree and your attempts to publish research.